Part 1, expanded, 700 words. Snow fell in slow, heavy sheets across the high ridge, blurring the peaks into white ghosts and swallowing the narrow trails that only a man like Caleb Rourke could still navigate blind. Winter in the Montana frontier was merciless, hard enough to break a normal man, harder still to keep one company. Caleb didn't mind the silence. In fact, he had come to depend on it. After years riding in the cavalry, then trapping alone in the mountains, solitude was the only thing he trusted. That morning, the cold bit sharper than usual, clawing at his exposed skin as he stepped outside his cabin. The timber walls groaned under the weight of snow, the smoke from the chimney rising in a thin, reluctant ribbon. Caleb adjusted his coat, slung his rifle over his shoulder, and headed toward the trapline. But halfway across the yard, something made him pause. A flicker of pale movement on the rooftop. Not big enough to be a bear. Too still to be a bird. Something was wrong. Instinct prickled the back of his neck. He crouched, narrowing his eyes against the blinding white. Hair. Long, tangled hair, blonde. A cold curse slipped through his teeth. He sprinted to the side of the cabin, boots crunching through the crust of snow. A rough ladder leaned there, icy rungs slick beneath his gloves. As he climbed, the wind picked up, whipping the long strands of hair like shredded corn silk. When he reached the top, everything inside him clenched. It wasn't just hair. It was a woman. She was tied brutally to the roof beams with rawhide strips biting into her wrists and ankles. Her dress was torn from the cold, her skin blue from exposure. Her head hung at an angle that made Caleb's stomach twist, but when he pressed his fingers against her neck, he felt it, faint, fragile, life. Son of a, he muttered. He cut the straps one by one, catching her limp body before it could roll off the roof. She weighed almost nothing, as if the wind had already started to claim her. Her breath came in small, ragged shivers. Then he saw it, her shoulder, scorched with a fresh brand. The flesh still blistered, still oozing. 3 inches long, ugly, deliberate. The smell of burned skin hit him too late. 2 words, Apache lover. Caleb felt his pulse kick. Not because he believed the words, he'd spent years among tribes and knew their way of marking an enemy. This wasn't it. This brand was made by men pretending to be Apaches, men who wanted fear more than truth. But fear had nothing to do with the sickness turning his stomach. This brand was a message, a provocation, and its target was him. He picked her up carefully, cradling her weight against his chest. The woman's head lolled against him, her lips split and pale. The storm clawed at them as he climbed down and rushed into the cabin, kicking the door shut behind him. Inside, the fire snapped angrily, like it too sensed the violation. Caleb laid the woman on his bed, stripping off the frozen remnants of her dress and wrapping her tight in wool blankets. Then he fed the fire more wood, rubbed warmth into her arms, and checked her breathing again. Minutes passed, or hours, he couldn't tell. He kept working, his hands steady but his mind racing. Who had done this? Who wanted him involved? At last, the woman's eyelids fluttered. A sliver of blue peeked through. She tried to speak, but her throat rasped like broken glass. Caleb leaned in, brushing frost from her cheek. You're safe now, he said, though he wasn't sure it was true. She stared at him, confused, frightened. Her lips formed a word he almost didn't catch. Help. Part 2, expanded, 700 words. The storm had broken by the next morning, leaving behind a sky scrubbed clean and bright with winter light. The mountains glistened like sharpened blades, their edges catching the sun in a way that made Caleb squint as he stepped outside to scan the treeline. But nothing moved. No deer, no coyote, no man. Too quiet, the kind of quiet that made a seasoned mountain hunter uneasy. He returned inside, shaking off the cold. The woman, Lydia, lay wrapped tightly in blankets, her breath steadier now but still weak. He sat beside her, the wooden chair creaking under his weight. Her eyelids flickered, struggling against exhaustion. When she finally forced them open, confusion clouded the blue of her eyes. Caleb handed her a tin cup of warm broth. Drink slow. You're safe in my cabin. Safe, she echoed, as if tasting the word for the first time. She drank in trembling sips, her fingers barely strong enough to hold the cup. After a long moment, Caleb asked, "Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated, eyes darting around the room as if searching for something familiar. Then, softly, "Lydia." Her voice was fragile, but her spirit, Caleb sensed it, wasn't broken. "Not yet," he nodded. "I'm Caleb Rourke. You're in the Montana high country, a good distance from any town. Whoever left you here, he stopped himself, jaw tightening. You've been through hell. Her gaze dropped to the blanket around her shoulders, but the burned flesh beneath it still throbbed with every heartbeat. Caleb saw the pain flicker across her face when she shifted. Quietly, he said, I saw the brand. Lydia froze. A shudder ran through her. She gripped the blanket tighter, knuckles white. Please, don't think it's true, she whispered. They did it to shame me. To make me look like, her voice cracked. I don't, Caleb said firmly. I know what real Apache markings look like. Men did that, white men. Her breath hitched. She looked up sharply, surprised that he knew. Maybe surprised someone believed her. Caleb waited, letting the silence soften around her. Eventually, Lydia began to speak, haltingly at first, then with growing desperation, as if the telling itself kept her alive. We were traveling west, she said. A group of families. We thought the valley trail was safe. Caleb had heard this story too many times. Settlers pushed farther west each year, never realizing how many predators, man and beast, hid in the folds of the mountains. It was near dusk when they came, Lydia continued. Not Apaches. They dressed like them, face paint, feathers, crude war whoops, but their boots were wrong. Their horses wrong. Everything wrong. Her fingers dug into the blankets, trembling. They took the women. They shot the men. My father. Her voice broke entirely. Caleb lowered his head. There was nothing he could say to fill that kind of hole. She swallowed hard, continuing. They dragged us to a camp. The leader, Braddock, he watched me. Like I was something he'd owned before even touching me. And when I fought back, when I scratched him, she lifted her shoulder slightly, the burn throbbing beneath the fabric. He held me down, branded me himself. He said if I thought savages wanted me so much, then he'd make it clear to every man alive. Caleb's hands curled into fists. Braddock. He hadn't heard that name in years. A raider, a murderer, a ghost who had once run with a unit Caleb crossed paths with during his cavalry days. Braddock was the kind of man who didn't just kill, he enjoyed the spectacle of cruelty. Lydia continued, voice barely a whisper. Then he said something strange. Something about a mountain man. Caleb stiffened. He said, hang her on the roof of that mountain bastard. Rourke will sniff around sooner or later. She met Caleb's eyes. He meant you. Caleb's jaw locked. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. Why you? Why bring you to my land? I don't know, Lydia whispered. But, they knew your name. They knew where you lived. Before he could answer, a memory flashed into his mind. Boot prints in the snow from earlier, circling the cabin like wolves testing a pen. Braddock's men hadn't hidden their presence. They wanted him to see. Wanted him rattled. They watched me rescue you, Caleb said quietly, piecing it together. They wanted me involved. Lydia's voice quavered. Will they come back for me? Caleb went to his rifle rack, choosing his long gun and checking the chamber. They aren't coming back for you, he said, pulling on part 3, expanded 700 words. Night wrapped itself around the mountains like a thick, black shroud. The temperature dropped so sharply the trees cracked in the cold, echoing like distant rifle shots. Caleb moved through the forest with practiced silence, each footstep deliberate, each breath measured. Snow muffled all sound except the steady thump of his heartbeat and the faint whistle of wind weaving through the pines. He should have stayed with Lydia. A softer man might have. But Caleb wasn't built for softness, not anymore, and not when danger prowled so close. Braddock and his men had stalked these woods for hours before dropping their bait on Caleb's roof. They knew the land well enough to move unseen, and well enough to leave a trail meant for him alone. And Caleb wasn't about to let that challenge pass unanswered. He followed the signs, broken branches, boot prints angled in purposeful patterns, cigarette ash still warm on snow. Braddock's men weren't being careless. They were leading him somewhere. Fine, let them. The deeper Caleb trekked into the trees, the more the trail narrowed. The lantern glow he'd left behind at the cabin became a dim flicker swallowed by distance. But Lydia was armed now. He'd shown her how to hold the pistol properly, how to brace her hands, how to fire if she heard anything bigger than a rabbit scratching at the door. She had fear in her eyes, yes, but also something else. Something unbroken. He'd seen it before in survivors. The moment they refused to be victims anymore. An hour passed before Caleb finally spotted the glow of campfire through the trees. Voices drifted across the clearing, coarse, unguarded. Men certain they held the upper hand. Caleb crouched behind a fallen pine, studying the camp. 6 men, maybe 7. Most lounged by the fire, rifles within reach. Braddock sat at the head of the circle, sharpening a long hunting knife on a whetstone. The orange light caught the jagged scar across his jaw. Lydia's doing. Caleb's teeth clenched. Braddock wasn't a stranger. They had crossed paths during the war, both fighting under a flag neither of them respected anymore. Braddock had deserted his post after massacring a band of Shoshone women, blaming Indians for a crime committed by his own hands. Caleb had testified against him. Braddock vanished before the sentence was carried out. Until now, Caleb stepped from the trees, rifle steady. Braddock. The fire crackled, boots scuffed, men stiffened. Braddock slowly rose, knife hanging loose from his fingers. Knew the mountain dog would sniff the trail, he said, grinning wide. Did you like our gift? Caleb didn't answer. His rifle spoke for him. A single shot cracked through the clearing, dropping the first man before he even looked up. Chaos erupted. Gunfire lit the night, muzzle flashes spraying like lightning. Caleb moved fast, a shadow slipping behind trees, firing with cold precision. 2 more men fell before they even located him. Braddock roared orders, firing wildly into the dark. Rourke, still playing hero. That girl will die screaming same as the rest. Caleb shot the gun from his hand. Braddock howled, clutching his bleeding palm. Another outlaw charged. Caleb from the right. Caleb swung the stock of his rifle hard, sending the man sprawling before finishing him with a swift strike. Within minutes, the clearing fell silent except for the crackle of flames in Braddock's ragged breathing. The outlaw leader stumbled backward, knife drawn again, desperation replacing confidence. You should have stayed hidden on that mountain, Braddock snarled. You should have died quiet. Caleb approached slowly, tossing his empty rifle aside. You put that woman through hell, he growled. You branded her, left her to freeze. Braddock spat blood. She scratched me. She earned it. Caleb lunged. They crashed into the snow, grappling with brutal force. Braddock slashed wildly, the blade grazing Caleb's ribs, but Caleb's strength, and fury, were greater. He pinned Braddock, wrenching the knife from his grip and pressing it to his throat. This is for Lydia, he said coldly. Braddock's eyes widened, then the snow beneath them bloomed red. It was over. Caleb rose, breathing hard, chest burning. The forest fell silent again, as if holding its breath. By dawn, he made it back to the cabin, blood crusted on his coat, ribs throbbing with every step. The door flew open before he could knock. Lydia stood there, pale but alive, pistol shaking in her grip. When she saw him, her knees buckled with relief. You came back. Caleb caught her before she fell. I said I would. She pressed her face to his chest, trembling. What happens now? Caleb looked out at the mountains, the ones he'd once thought belonged to him alone. Now he saw them differently. Now, he said quietly, we start over. Together. If you want that. Lydia looked up at him, hope flickering like the first warm light of spring. I do, she whispered. And for the first time in years, Caleb Rourke didn't feel like a lonely mountain man at all. His coat. They're waiting for me.